The following poem is Stephen's Season. Alan made an advance request that I read this one today, and I was very happy to oblige. The poet Wallace Stevens normally walked 2 miles to work every business day, and then the 2 miles home in Hartford, Connecticut. And this was when he composed most of his verse. Stephen's Season. They say Wallace Stevens composed verse as he counted his way to work. Steps levitating to a proud ear, rhythmic pronunciations. Clarity of verse combined with diversions of the street, and much was lost or much was gained, as momentary lapses of metaphor brought the business and busyness of bustle and brattle too close, and hid a sonnet for a secret season. The next poem, Alan made reference to it, is St. Paul's Chapel. And as he said, it's been the memento card at the chapel since the chapel reopened to the general public on September the 11th, 2002. I volunteered at times in the chapel when it served as the relief center for the recovery workers during the 9 months of cleanup at Ground Zero from September to May. The chapel has been a memorial site since 2002, drawing even now on average 30,000 people a week. St. Paul's Chapel. It stood, not a window broken, not a stone dislodged. It stood when nothing else did. It stood when terrorists brought September down. It stood among myths. It stood among ruins. To stand was its purpose. Long lines prove that. It stands, and around it now a shrine of letters, poems, acrostics, litter of the heart. It is the standing people want, to grieve, serve, and tend, celebrate the lasting stone of St. Paul's Chapel. And deep into its thick breath, the largest banner fittingly from Oklahoma climbs heavenward with hands as stars, hands as stripes, hands as a flag. And a rescuer reaches for a stuffed toy to collect a touch. And George Washington's pew doesn't go unused. Charity fills a hole or two. It stood in place of other sorts. It stood when nothing else could. The great had fallen as the brute hardware came down. It stood. To continue briefly the 9/11 moment, I'll read my other short 9/11 poem, Fear of Flying. Frida and I were downtown in our offices close to the South Tower. You'll hear echoes of the St. Paul's poem, Fear of Flying. We're downtown on September the 11th, minding our business, tending fate. There's one moment early in advance of the rest when birds don't sing being in flight, when they wind alongside many a parched cornice. No, they never sing without a grip. And we want to be with God. Around the corner across from St. Paul's Chapel, people take on air. Some leap, while most degrade into vapor in one giant cough, dropping headlong through flames or debris, never landing. God save them and us. Wait! We at air raid effect to lighten the torque. Balloons, yes, balloons, and footballs, kites, all fly so high a loose languor, as if ordained aloft in undiminishable space, retiring into well-stretched and elevated hands. God meant for rare things to happen, but not for a man with a butcher knife to cut an airborne tether. By hell's unchoked wretch, a gas-blackened plume heatedly swells a swatch of cellophane heavenward, higher still. How does it happen some things rise air-tucked without ties, staves, or other fast catch-me's? Atop an attenuating breath, the swath should land, but when? Wisdom comes once we've taken place. So there. Flying is good for business, we're told, but is it good for us? For a change of pace, a lighter poem on the physical phases that try to trick us along the way. Another sultry moment. Flesh is the thing. Sere, rough-hewn leather says we've gotten old and baroque. Fruit-flavored and spot-free, suppleness tells a much different story. We knew the latter once, when sap rose daily, nightly, continually, not deciduously, no seasonal to seasonal preservation, no waiting upon a lambent pulse. Flesh was the thing. Now sap clogs on its way, slow to surface on the parch high of thinner skin. And yet we've learned the tricks of trading guile for unction and grit for sauce. Wizened in a grasp of sentient claims, flesh is still the thing. The title of this poem is Clouds. The clouds were poised and the hair was combed, the outfit chosen, the subject declared. Truth would be pursued. Against the walls of nomenclature and in the tangled roots of words, we thought we were ready. Though tongue-tied on incantations we murmured but couldn't recite. There were clouds heavy to rive, lightning at the cusp, claps so bearable whenever retrieved. And while we waited for a clarion high, the impervious clouds simply floated by. There is a painting by Edward Hopper entitled Nighthawks, which resonated the first time I saw it. The painting, as you may know, depicts a group of people separately sharing a late night scene in an urban diner. Here is an associated poem, Night Call. I, for one, need no safe exit out of the wild universe of the midnight cafe. Coffee not much instantly. Rain stuck to shoulders of the storm. I, for one, know my steps away, worn of solitude, as words hushed are now repeated in mute resonance. Beer mist, lascivious smoke, loss. Night calls gather the loose and dangerous strays the moral day rejects, so it is said. But I, for one, belong to the night, for it and I refuse the traces and lies of daylight, and we are one. The next poem, There's a Story. This is a story about the story. The story has a protagonist, jokester, one or two stand-ins, and foreground and background. And somebody gets hurt and another gets laid. At the end, love doesn't conquer all, but crime and redemption were inevitable. There's just one story, repeated anew. Elegy to a Distant Son. We live at a time when a not so unusual fare is for family members to be separated in divorce as though they were in a diaspora of war. My relations with my son have now improved by multiples. In fact, this is one of his favorite poems. It seemed fitting to write this one in an old-fashioned form. Elegy to a Distant Son. You will not know by any telling, son, the thoughts that I have softly shared with you. At once you weren't there. From divorce they run. And separate by place and unlike view, we cracked apart as though we were the rot. Myself for us was said to be untrue. You have your toys, mild talcums and low spot now at the ductile age of 24, and I have mine, now long in tooth and squat. We share a little only, nothing more, while even on our way to fluent ground. What's done, these coupled traits we're to ignore. You trekked into another side around, another side of scrubs and pits unbound. We should forge by two to bear us best, but you have gods among brambles and trees, the gods you chose without my watchful test. Around the deeper bush, as I by degrees have learned to practice distance to survive. We quickened sports news, spun as similes, with pitchers, catchers, scores, as points alive and hugs, for father-son things were denied, from which a verbal covenant could derive. And now from here, just simply put aside, for you'll do yours and I will go to mine, yet deep within the sleep of foster tide, and maybe on a day of law or sign, you will discover something we define. And maybe at the birth of any child, or moments moiling through the smoke of loss, or left behind a pair of fools self-styled, will shed from us this tumid albatross, before again it madly perseveres. What makes our mutual blood a double cross? And if the promise welcome back appears, we'd squinch badly for lines so meant to save. A flutter to both tongue and vow adheres, to doubt reprised in restive words but brave. A safe distance opens a safe landscape. While musing on the slights that we forgave, I stalk your many secrets I'd reshape, but you're just moving faster to escape. This poem, Eyeing a Frisky Muse, isn't quite so severe. In fact, this one may be a little fun, especially for poets who wonder about why they wear themselves out in verse. Eyeing a Frisky Muse. Poems, even small ones, use lots of calories when written well. Now some think brain power and intellectual jaunts alone place those odd little lines together. But the body, animated by dactyls into dumb to dumb, exhausts itself even from mere paeans or anapest, whether by ode, Byzantium, or love of limestone. Poems take the best of us. And don't count on speed to help, though some will say so, for speed deludes and suggests magic it can't deliver, while still others say to be clever is to be lyric, if not heroic. But I say that zing and zest and energy in the chest bring forth the eye that works the page to craft the lines to tame the rage. The killer. There is much killing around us. I wrote this one a bit in the instant space of the killer. Pull the trigger, find the shock. Sun, moon, the meteors, these, no one to remember a thing. Sundowns drain into estimate after a shot's gut fired and the target hit at bull's eye. That's the way we want it. One mission, one instrument, the skill to make it happen. Even for one who tastes more salty blood repeatedly, the routine shall not stale. Sweat rains, spit vacates, odor washes a moment. One shot, that's what I'll give myself. Head straight, no blinking, relax the hold, breathe halfway, I'm ready, yes. A figure falls before the recoil evaporates. As my eyes widen, as I murmur and distill to this, I still the strength, from these I kill. Now we'll take a short trip back into the garden. Which garden, you ask? The original garden. Back in the garden. The serpent has requested of the apple tree, except for indifferent pride and such jazz, that aside, what will be the common sin of all? Its branches astir, the apple tree replied, doubtless as nothing comes close that I foresee, idolatry, idolatry, idolatry. It'll be everywhere, a crude potpourri, work for some, shrine of power for others, food, drugs, incandescent sex, fast wine, sports and money, enough white marble. An endless number of things and stuff without which the mystique of it, the children of God will think they cannot live for a week. The serpent, replete with smiles, went his own way, for the game was set and the fix complete. An introduction for the next poem, Dream Maker, can't be done. It's a poem to be heard or read, then one can try later to say something, if anything, about it. Dream Maker. I threw flamboyant words away, believing they limited what I meant to say. Then I talked remarkably and relied on talking. How I come to others to be closer to myself. Afterwards I dreamed nothings, and nothing came of them, proving how weak dreams are. For centuries, the English language didn't find it necessary for the apostrophe S to identify a plural. It meant possessive, period. A plain OS, ES, or on occasion an I did perfectly fine, thank you. Then a strange fever took over the land with apostrophe S for plurals. I wrote this poem, Abduction of the Apostrophe S, to express my thoughts. There's reference to Cranmer in the poem. In the 1500s, he made changes to the Book of Common Prayer in England and was burned at the stake for his efforts. Montaigne in the 1580s said, "Most of the grounds of the world's troubles are matters of grammar." I wouldn't go that far, but he did have his point. Abduction of the apostrophe S. They thought they were smart, stealing another state to govern. Before the crime, it possessed everything in its path and over the verdant horizon. And then along came tinkers and friends, and voila, the apostrophe S began to be a plural maker too. For reasons without a clue, it no longer was enough being owner of those fecund nouns pounding afterwards. Surely whoever coined the con that an apostrophe S should convey so many ought to be burned at the stake. A few more Cramners to illume an Oxford square. I wish I could also break spell windings, mishaps by misplaced letters, and remind an editor or two of the multiple thefts committed on an innocent alphabet. But this is much worse, for we're killing off by caprice quiet tools that kept the peace. The title of this poem is Late Morning Moon. They will come into sight, illumination and host. Few, if any, questions will have to be asked, and things will fall into place, and things to be done will levitate into more perfect shapes. Stay the road. Opalescent weather rings, and an ultimate way extrudes into the distance, without combative canards, without oblique trials or unwanted fever. Remember those to whom you wish to be compared. They have a simple loss, and nothing's misunderstood. Simple lessons taught through simple feats, each time at each speed. Does one ever think in poetry? Some say Mozart thought only in music, but Auden in staccato rhythms. Many say devils and angels fight for the ears of us all, and the battle hymns of the two reputedly translate into a language of gods. I, for one, believe it. Not because poetry is grand, nor music rates as the finest mode of travel. No, I've now lived long enough to hold that both good and bad have their places in this world, and the outcome of the dialectic struggle rushes to become the chorus of divine cries, and all the rest, merely rehearse the degree we think in poetry. This is my last. It's a short love poem. The earth shook, went bad, and came round again. We caught an evening sky and put all disturbed objects and crooked things back together, and the earth coalesced around our love and slipped back into a smooth slumber. Thank you.